Overthrowing cricket's empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Uncovered podcast. I'm Behram who you can find at DefMango on Twitter, and with me, as always, is Jarrod Kimber, who you can find literally everywhere. Apologies for the delay. We were just checking the volume because last couple of times, there have been some issues with the volume, and if we're just 18 minutes late, it's not too late, right, guys?
I don't know why anyone. It's a serving suggestion. The times that we're going to start our podcast.
Yeah. Also, we've got Santosh Kumar, Yash Singh, Abdul TS, Umang Jain, Sag, Jessica Bell, and Vignesh Ram in the comments. So hello to you guys as well. And we've got a few things to discuss, actually. Let's start off with Moeen Ali. And he has called time on his international career. I'm just going to read out his numbers real quick, Jarrod. 3,094 runs in 68 test matches at an average of 28. And he's got 204 wickets as well at 37 apiece. ODIs, he's played 138, scored 2,355 runs at 24, and then 111 wickets at just under 48 apiece. Now in T20s, he's got 1,129 runs in 92 games, and he's averaging 21, striking at over 142. He's got 51 wickets at an economy of 8.31. Now, even though I've just read those out to you, stats don't really do justice to the kind of cricketer that Moeen was. He was the ultimate utility cricketer.
No, we did a podcast about that before, didn't we? It's, he's ended up with some nice counting stats along the way anyway. But yeah, it's more about the fact that he could be used in any particular batting number by England, which I think which was quite interesting. It kind of ruined his batting, but it also showed you the general level of play that he had. And then as a bowler, like, he wasn't a bowler, right? Like he became a bowler very late in his career and kept working at it. And his best ball was as good as anyone's, really. And his worst ball was pretty ordinary. And he had trouble with control at times. And certainly went for probably more runs. He's one of the few finger spinners in history who's been a strike bowler. Like, he legitimately took wickets at a very high rate, but went for a lot in his economy. So sort of the opposite of what you expect of a finger spinner.
Yeah, he was very selfless in many ways. Literally did bat almost every position for England, right? And that might not have helped him, but he would always be there to plug a gap or fill a cavity, and he always had this tendency to rise to the occasion in key moments, right? Like, Moeen was that impact player that England needed, and he would always be providing balance to the 11. And with the ball, as you said, not his primary skill, but every now and then he could really rip one and it would be a worldie. And he's got a test hat trick, right? So he's got little moments like those.
Oh, some brilliant wickets when you go through, especially when you look at his highlights reel. Like, it's a real sexy highlights reel for a finger spinner. Yeah. He fought with the idea of him being a spinner, and that's because he, for the first 27 years of his life or 26 years of his life, wasn't a spinner at all. And so he sort of fought against that quite a bit. But I think it's an incredible career to have when you are picked for the skill that you don't even think that you have, and you manage to have such a great international career and, be involved in World Cups and all sorts of things. You look at him from a T20 perspective, probably one of the best hitters of left arm finger spin in the world.
Yeah.
I remember I was at RCB when RCB signed him, and they didn't really use him particularly well, especially compared to how Chennai would later on. But I just remember how excited they were to have him. I remember seeing him in the Blast, and probably maybe even the Pro 40 back in the day, and just watching him and go, this guy's incredible. and then when he started bowling, it was kind of a bizarre thing for someone who'd seen him play when he was a lot younger, but very highly skilled player. And a very humble, normal human being, I think would be the other one. I did hear
Yeah.
him swear once, and it was they were playing some game, and I don't even remember what it was, but it was like, I don't know, it was kind of like an NFL version of volleyball or something. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it was a really weird game that they were doing. And it was something about, I think, loosening their arms for throwing. And Alistair Cook did something, and Moeen Ali just went at him. I can't remember if they were on the same team or not in this game, but something happened, and he just went at him. And I was like, that is the least Moeen Ali thing I've ever seen. But he talked about for a great deal of his career wanting to retire from cricket and go and clean the toilets at the local mosque. Like, that's just not a normal thing for a player to it's not a normal thing for a player to mention toilets, let alone, the rest of it. I think he's kind of moved on from that emotionally. And I know that he was very pious at one stage in his career, and perhaps emotionally not quite at that same head state as he was in his mid to late 20s, early 30s. But what a fantastic cricketer, and probably from an English cricket point of view, a very important cricketer. When you look at his ethnicity and his religion and everything else, like I think came along at a very good time for English cricket. And obviously Adil Rashid was having trouble with getting respect in English cricket for a long time, and Moeen sort of came in and sort of changed things a lot.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of it from that perspective, he was such a massive inspiration for young South Asian and Muslim cricketers in the UK. And it's not like, they didn't have any South Asian/Muslim cricketers in the past. Nasser Hussain captained England, but Moeen was very visibly also Muslim. He was a pious guy, and he was playing cricket at a time where there were a lot of stigmas and taboos, right? And that's kind of what he was able to overturn, similar to what Hashim Amla also did, right? Because both of those guys were playing in teams where that wasn't the norm. And then he was just so aesthetically pleasing to watch, like silky as hell, right? Left-handed bat. Even if he'd score like 12 runs in an innings, you would pay to watch those 12 runs. That's how good he would look. And if he got going in a game, then you were toast, right? Because if he was belligerent, he was a great striker of the ball. And as you mentioned, a humble guy, adored by his teammates and everyone in cricket. I don't think anyone has ever hated on Moeen Ali. I'm yet to meet that person, right? And because of those reasons, he has not just been a fantastic ambassador for English cricket, but I feel like this, sport at large, he's been a fantastic ambassador for cricket, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think if you're a cricket fan, it probably, we've talked about this sort of stuff before with all-rounders. Like, people kind of either think they're legends or they're useless, and he probably fits somewhere in the middle of that. And it depends on how you feel about it in cricket. But I think the aesthetic thing is one of the most important things that you mentioned before. I don't think anyone ever looked at him and wasn't like, didn't think they were looking at someone incredibly stylish. And as you were talking about batting, but you can put his bowling in there as well. Like, those, when it worked for him and the ball came out exactly as he wanted it to, it's one of the best finger spinning deliveries in the game, right? So everything he did was good from a looks perspective. There are holes in his career and everything. I think that's fair, but he's a very, very important cricketer in many ways, I think, for English cricket, and was probably given too many different jobs by English cricket, on and off the field, perhaps. But I think he stood up to them pretty well.
Yeah. Also, guys, we do have a footmark somewhere, in the archives that we've done on Moeen Ali. So if you want us or wanted to listen to us talk about him more, you can go to that one. And, Stuart Broad, all of his teammates, everyone has echoed the same sentiment. And yeah, like, if everyone is talking about you in such high regard, and every single person who I know on Twitter is also making the point that stats don't do Moeen Ali justice. Don't let them fool you. I think you've done a good enough job. Plus, if you look at the trophy cabinet, right? ODI World Cup winner, T20 World Cup winner, and he's got an Ashes at home as well, I believe. Even though it was kind of, Nathan Lyon's, bunny in Australia. That was definitely a thing in Moeen's career. But I feel like he's done enough to kind of, retire as a legend of England cricket in a different, weird way. And he will be remembered. Like, that's the sort of impact that he created.
No, definitely agree. Couldn't
Yeah.
agree anymore.
All right, let's go to our next topic, and that is Freddie Flintoff getting a new job. So it's interesting how this might not be massive news in all other cricketing circles, but because we've been covering it from like a long time, I just want to like go over all the different stages of this whole cycle. Originally, Freddie Flintoff, after his accident, right, was a consultant with England's white ball team. That's how it all started. He then very recently quit that job because apparently he didn't gel with Joss Butler. After that, he consulted England's red ball team during the Oval Test versus Sri Lanka, the one that they lost. And now he is England Lions head coach. And it really seems like they wanted to get him or keep him involved, Jared.
It feels like Rob Key was desperate to get Flintoff around. I felt I haven't talked to that many England players, but I've talked to some people who have been sort of in that area, and there was a feeling that just Flintoff was just a little bit old school, and they'd moved on from that side of things. And I think I remember we did a podcast with Rob Barron over at Cricket 8 recently, and he was saying that Rob Key's been pretty honest that he doesn't believe in coaches, and so Flintoff is almost like the ultimate version of that pick, right? I don't believe in coaches. I just believe in vibes. And Flintoff's going to give vibes. But he's a very strong character, Flintoff. And he does come with bits of baggage, I think, when it comes to coaching and everything else. And I find it very interesting that the senior players didn't want to work with him. And so they just moved him to the junior players. I have some issues with all this because I'm not sure that he's really kept up to date with modern cricket, and England is the most progressive team when it comes to strategies and plans and executions. Even when India, South Africa, and Australia might have caught up to them in white ball cricket and other forms, I think England's still a little bit more progressive when it comes to trying things, maybe getting them wrong as well, but trying things and everything. And this feels like a bit of a throwback for no reason.
Yeah.
I can't imagine he's the best coach available for the England Lions. But let's see what he does, I suppose. And it'd be very interesting to see if it goes well and that older generation of English players move out. Then there might be a Rahul Dravid situation where they could just move him up to head coach, right?
That is an interesting one. And I was also a bit surprised because England have been, a team who have appointed coaches which are sure they've had their radical moments, right? But this is a bit out of the ordinary because Flintoff doesn't really have any credentials other than being consultant of the head, like the white ball team. And then also he's just been head coach of a 100 team, the Northern Superchargers, if I'm not wrong. And the England Lions is a pretty important job as well because that's the pipeline, right? And they tour quite regularly and important ones as well. Like the India tour is what got Matthew Potts a place in the team once again, right? So those are serious cricket games, and they're not like under 19 games either. These are just the second string players. So if he is old school, then those guys might have an issue as well. And I was just thinking out loud that he might even get to coach his son at some point, right? Because Rocky Flintoff is in the system. So look, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, I think generally teams go with more, or cricket boards go with more technical coaches at that level, right? So someone who agrees with the general principle of what cricket is trying to build, but more technical coach. So Rahul Dravid's the most famous version of this, right? Of someone who really took over the Lions team and not the Lions, the India A team.
He was with the under-19 team, no?
He's with both.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And I thought that was a really interesting one because I thought it really suited Rahul Dravid's personality, probably more than being the head coach. Like having had some chats with him while he was head coach, I think he probably preferred to work with the kids and that next generation a lot more. But Rahul Dravid's a very technical coach, right? Like, that is part of it. I'm not saying he doesn't, the mental side's obviously a big part of his game. And I know he worked on trying to create a relaxed atmosphere within the change room and all these different things. But
he's also an inspirational bloke. Rahul Dravid, like if he's giving a speech, the entire team would be listening.
But when it comes down to it, he's a cricket nerd who sees someone with their hands in the wrong position and tries to fix them. A lot of my chats with Rahul Dravid are about like stuff that like we couldn't even put them on a podcast because normal people would be like, it's like that. I don't know if you ever saw that LeBron James, JJ Redick podcast. which is hilarious now because LeBron James is coaching JJ Redick. Sorry, JJ Redick is coaching LeBron James. But that podcast is like, I knew a lot about basketball, and even I had to pause sometimes and go, "What the fuck are they talking about?" Right? Like that's kind of how Raul can be. Like sometimes, like he will just throw out a thing of, and then you'll have to sit there and go, "Wait, did he? Is this what he's talking about?" That's really the sort of person you want coaching the youngsters. You might still want that imprint of where of the general vibes, the baseball vibes. Let's say they want to move that and have that culture there, but you really want the players to get the technical knowledge that they need as well at that level. So that's one of my questions with Freddy Flintoff, is whether that's his main way of looking at it. He had a very idiosyncratic way of playing, I think. And you watch his son, obviously his son is, got exactly the same thing. So there's something about their physicality that do that. That doesn't mean he's not going to be a good coach and he's not going to be successful in this role. But it's weird that he went. Something's quite weird about the fact suddenly he's being pushed in every direction in English cricket as a franchise coach and everything else. Just to say this, they did have a good record in the 100 Northern Superchargers. They went 5-2. So right. No problem with his record so far. I'm not saying he gets all the credit for that, but it wasn't as if was it London Spirit who didn't win a game, 1-7, or Manchester Originals.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at Baz, right, a lot of it is vibes. Of course, there is the technical side to Brendan McCullum of how he keeps picking players based on quick viz, and that's an entire separate conversation altogether. But you can expect vibes from Freddy Flintoff as well, and he's a charismatic bloke. I can see him kind of owning his own space in a dressing room and talking to these kids. But my concerns are the same. Is he a technical guy? And what was up with the urgency of keeping him in the system and making sure he has a job? That's the thing that really strikes out in this entire scenario.
Yeah, there's a part of me is like, was the rest of the world desperate to hire Freddy Flintoff? Like I have not heard his name linked to any. Like when the Rajasthan position, is there one other position in the IPL? There's probably a couple scattered throughout franchise cricket at the moment. I don't remember his name being mentioned. It wasn't like they were about to lose him, the ECB. It feels very weird that he's suddenly gone from not being interested in being involved in cricket at all to being offered all these different positions. It's not to say he won't do well at them, because I do think he has an incredible cricket brain, but something about it just feels a bit odd to me.
Yep, likewise. Anyway, next up, we've got Australia's test match opening batter conundrum. Funny how we're here right now, because both of us also did a footbox on Steve Smith potentially opening the batting. You can go check that one out as well. And so no selector has said anything. Just to confirm over here, there are a bunch of veteran sports journalists and broadcasters.
Crash Craddock, I think, was the main one.
Yeah. Craddock was there, and Waitley was another, I believe. And Waitley was quite critical of Smith opening the batting, and he was saying that this is basically a recipe for disaster. Craddock said that he is certain that Smith won't open against India in the Border Gavaskar Trophy, right? And we've heard from Andrew McDonald as well, the coach, that, give Smith time. It's unfair and harsh on him to just judge him on these few innings, which I kind of agree with. He had that knock versus the West Indies in the fourth innings as opener, so it's not like he hasn't done anything. But these guys, Craddock and Waitley, what they basically want is an opener in the test team who is of that same ilk as Davey Warner, so a like-for-like batter, because they believe that the old formula worked just fine. And for that, they want Travis Head to come and, occupy that spot. And Head has been woefully out of form at number 5, but if you just look at him bat, across formats, and especially in recent times, he is one of the most destructive batters going around. Now, maybe these guys want Head to do the exact same thing in the test team, but he's very well suited to his number 5 role. He's done extremely well there. I don't think Head would be open to the change of role either. He would be enjoying batting at number 5. And you mentioned, what if Khawaja retires? What do you do then, right?
Yeah, I don't really understand the sudden push against Steve Smith as an opener based on what we've seen so far. I'm not saying it's been massively successful, but he's been struggling for quite a while in a few different ways. So I don't really understand why we're suddenly at this point right at the moment. But yeah, the age thing is a big deal, because I mean, Khawaja might play for a couple more years, but I could also see. I mean, Usman Khawaja is, doing stuff for Amazon Prime, and he's got his own YouTube channel and everything.
Yeah.
It feels to me like Usman Khawaja is very much thinking about the next part of his career, right? Like, that there's an element of him planning ahead, and also he hasn't made any runs, I don't think, this year. So you've just got a new opener, and you are then going to have another new opener almost straight away already, right? And your current opener hasn't made any runs this year. It feels to me like a bit of a weird situation to suddenly be in. That you want to make this change. Look, the real issue is that Australia doesn't have any openers, right? I mean, Usman Khawaja is opening because they don't have any openers. I think you could make a pretty good case that Travis Head in the last couple of years has been, one of the best number fives in the game. There's Sword Shaquille, probably Harry Brook and Daryl Mitchell. Is that the list? I think of the guys who kind of batted in that area. So if you take him away, you are putting him back to you're opening with him, and you're taking away a position of strength. And that Marsh Head partnership at the moment is like brutal for Australia, right?
Yeah.
So you're separating
it's a
that
1-2 counter punch, right? And I love how Australia have kind of, formulated this team because they bat differently in different phases, right? They're going to consolidate and grind it out, at the start. And then when it comes to Head and Marsh, it's literally a knockout punch whenever it does work out. And even if one of those guys does well, Australia's batting looks in good stead. And, I think Andrew McDonald will push for Smudger to continue to open the batting. But like the criticism and this being like a hot topic is so widespread that even Matthew Hayden has come and voiced his opinion that no, he doesn't think Steve Smith should open, and that he's so well suited to the number 4 role that he doesn't want to give away or compromise on the runs over there. But then why Travis Head, right? Why
that's what I would
that
say.
Isn't broken?
If at the moment, here's my question for you. At the moment, who's the better batter in Test cricket?
Travis Head.
Right? So we're more than happy as a cricket fraternity to screw over Travis Head, who's playing very well. But we're not more than happy for Steve Smith, who's the one who offered to change, to do it. Like it doesn't make any sense to me, right? And Travis Head batting at number 5 averages about 45, I think, in the last couple of years anyway. And Steve Smith averages 48 at number 4, right? Yeah. But Travis Head batting at number 5 has a strike rate of 85 or whatever, right? So it's about the same. Travis Head is the future, and Steve Smith, I don't want to say he's the past, but he's not the future, is he? He's the present at best. If he's willing to do it and thinks he can make it work, I would go with that. I think the real element is they just want Head to go up the top and smack him. And I did a podcast with Deep Das Gupta with TalkSport yesterday, John Norman and I, and this idea that Travis Head will be able to do what he does in T20 cricket and one-day cricket in Test cricket feels like a stretch to me. And the reason I'd say it feels like a stretch is he gets bowled an awful lot in those formats. Like if you go back, I know people, people like Rob Barron, he will say, bet on Travis Head to be bowled. Right. And, watching him in that T20 again yesterday, like backing away, showing his stumps, the sort of stuff that Travis Head does naturally. I just think that is going to be really, really tough. I think he's opened for mixed results in Test cricket so far. So I think he's done it 5 games. I think that's right. Yeah. 5 times he's opened the batting for 150 so far. Right.
Yeah.
It's not as if there's like this incredible record of him opening. So it just I don't really understand why the sudden push to get him in that position when quite clearly you look at the way he plays and number 5 is probably his best spot. So but the big issue here really isn't Smith and Head, right? I forget the people who want an attacking opener. They can go. I don't give a shit about that. But the real issue here is that Australia is in a very similar situation that England was in a couple of years ago, where all their batting positions overlap. So Smith and Green both want to bat at number 4, right? That's a huge issue. You then have Marsh. You could put Aaron Hardy in there as well. Probably both need to bat at number 6. So you can't fit both Marsh and Aaron Hardy in the same side. So then you've got another issue there. Head wants to bat at 5, but of course Green might have to go to 5. So there's this big overlap of positions 4, 5, and 6, where they've probably got like a lot of talented players that they could throw in. Inglis might be another one, right? Like if they wanted to play Inglis, he'll probably have to bat at 7, which is not a problem for a wicketkeeper. But again, probably suited more to 4, 5, 6 maybe as well. So they've got all these players that all could bat in the same area, and that is the issue, right? It really isn't about talent. They have 6 or 7 really talented batters for Test match cricket, maybe even 8, right? What they don't have is 2 openers. And the other issue here is that Marnus hasn't been making any runs, right?
Yeah.
So there's another world where, and I don't want Marnus dropped because I think he will work it out, and I think he will come good. But there is certainly, and he was just suspended for a fighting in a club game, wasn't he, Marnus? Wasn't he just suspended or fined or something for abusing someone?
I have no idea. I missed this news.
Yeah, but you look at Marnus and you think actually the probably the best way of working all this out might be if Marnus was dropped, right? So he was averaging over 50 for 3 or 4 years in a row, even over 60 for most of those years. The last couple of years, he's averaged 35, and so far this year, he's averaged 30, right? So he's averaging low 30s in the last couple of years. Smith or Green can probably pinch hit at number 3, which would allow all those other things to be fixed. The issue still is who opens the batting.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't change.
Massive issue.
It doesn't change. And so I just don't understand the idea of like ruining Head when you don't want to ruin Smith. Like
they keep saying
those are not the 2 options for me.
Yeah. They keep saying that they're not sold on Steve Smith as an opener, but you're also talking about Travis Head, who's been mad successful at number 5. And now you want him to go and open the batting as if he is some sort of natural opener in Test cricket. Like, how do you know how he'll fare versus the moving ball? And
how can you say you're not sold on Smith as an opening batter, but then decide you are sold on Head? How can you be sold on Head if he's done it 5 times and passed 50 once? Like, you can't. No. So that's what I was saying before of kind of like it doesn't really follow. Right, there isn't anything there that I think is massive. And you go back to Shield cricket and you have a look. It's like, let's be honest, Bancroft is still probably the guy who is the most likely, like in that list to come up. And there aren't a lot of players in Shield cricket making a lot of runs, so it isn't as if there's anyone there particularly who is banging down the door, and who knows how they feel about, someone like Bancroft. But like a lot of the guys, like I think Bo Webster was the one who made all the runs last year. Like he's not going to open the batting. I think Nathan McSweeney was the other guy who made a lot of runs off the top of my head. I don't think he opens the batting. They've got someone like, what's a young kid from New South Wales?
Matt Renshaw is there. Jessica Bell has just mentioned him.
But hasn't Matt Renshaw been batting down the order again? Hasn't he been batting?
Has he?
I don't know if he's been opening in first class cricket. I know he's moved down the order in other parts. And Oliver Davies is the kid I was thinking of from New South Wales, who it might be a little bit, and so it's not as if there's a lot of options. Matt Renshaw last year in first class cricket averaged 25 in Shield cricket, right? Like, do you know what I mean? I'm not saying there are no players there. You've got guys like. There are some names and everything else. Like Joe Burns was still one of the better scorers in Sheffield Shield cricket last year, and he's Italian now, right? Like, it's there's not an easy answer for this, but Travis Head is not the answer.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it. Plus, what people forget over here is that Steve Smith volunteered to become Test match opener. Right? He wanted the role. Who's to say that Head would even be open to the role, right? Because it works fine for him currently. And why would he even want to jeopardize, his spot in the team? Like, what if it doesn't work out? What do we do then? Who goes opener? Yeah. Who makes room for Head back at number 5 or 6? Like, there's so much to it. But it's really baffling to see how everyone in Australia seems to be on the same page regarding Smith not having to open, whereas you surely need a little bit more evidence. I think.
I just want to get back to what I said before. When I said Head's not the answer, that doesn't mean he won't go to open the batting and be successful. But head is just another question, and we're midway through the first question. And
Yeah.
I find it really interesting that this is the issue. Was the real issue should be, why is Australia not producing top order batters consistently at the lower level? You know, do they have to take a flyer on someone like Davies or something like that? Because there's clearly a big issue there.
Yeah, what will they do when the rebuilding phase comes, when Khawaja retires? You don't even talk about Head, Smith, and the other position, right? Just Khawaja. What happens when he goes, right? So it's a question that they really need to answer. And these stopgap solutions, which make no sense, are not the answer. As you said, they're just more questions. Anyway, now we're just left with one topic, but I feel like we should take a break because that's a big one. So you're watching Uncovered with Jarrod and Behram, and we'll see you shortly after this ad.
If you watch this channel, you'll love us on Main, where we do deep dives into the greatest cricket stories every week at Good Areas. How did Virat Kohli play that shot? What is so weird about Neil Wagner? And explaining the incredible misery of being a New Zealand opening batter. Visit our Good Areas site today. Want to show the world that you not only love cricket, but that you know the game deeply? Well, you need a Bodyline t-shirt. In fact, at Bodyline t-shirts, you can actually buy a t-shirt about Bodyline, but also tees inspired by the greatest players in our game. Head to Bodyline t-shirts today.
Welcome back to Uncovered. You guys are with Jarrod and Behram, and it's time for us, Jarrod, to talk about the Greater Noida fiasco. I was actually making notes for this particular story, and I also have to cover this for Pro Sports later. And there is so much to it. There are so many layers. There is so much to unpack that, I mean, it's really nerve-wracking in many ways. Let's talk about the very basics first. The match is as good as gone. 4 days in, we've had no play. You know, play has been abandoned all 4 days. The drainage facilities are clearly not up to scratch. Table fans have been used to dry, wet patches. And I saw you tweet about it that you said that was you trying to fix your car. And I mean, there have been like 5 to 6 wet patches within the 30-yard circle, right? And the ground staff has even tried to cut dry grass from practice pitches and replace the wet patches on the ground, and that has not worked. And then Ibrahim Zadran also got injured trying to field in the outfield, and he is out till the end of the South Africa ODI series. So he can't feature in that series as well. He's an important player for Afghanistan. And just, you know, from a very, very broad perspective, you know, this ground wasn't up to scratch to host international cricket, let alone test cricket.
No. Do you know what? It's also, it is one of those things when fans sometimes get really upset when players won't play in wet conditions. But cricket isn't really made to play in wet conditions. And so when you do try and do stuff in wet conditions, people can get injured, which is why we generally don't do it. So I think the Ibrahim Zadran is a good reminder for those people who are like, oh, they should just get out there and get on with it. But yes, they wanted that ground. They were very clear on it. The BCCI has moved on from that ground and basically said that they don't really believe it's of international level anymore. There's all sorts of things with the lack of super sopper and everything else. It's a clay-based ground rather than a sand-based ground. So I think this came out of Australia. It was some sort of study years ago when they realized why. I think it was the MCG was draining so much better, and I think it came out of Victorian cricket, and it was a real accident. It was something to do with, and I remember because I was studying greenkeeping at the time. It was something to do with they worked out that all the grounds near the coast would dry, and all the grounds not near the coast wouldn't, and that's when they worked out the sand. And if you ever go on the MCG and you touch the surface of the MCG and you put your hand up, it's just sand. So there's a lot of venues around the world that do that, and it obviously dries a lot better, and it's better than clay from that point of view. But there are lots of clay grounds around the world that just have really good drainage systems, and this one does not seem to have that. They wanted a ground that they could fly to easily from Kabul, didn't they? So the idea was they could fly in to Delhi and then just whip up the road to the ground. But it's bad, and there's a lot of finger pointing in different areas. But basically, this is what can happen if you don't have international quality support, right? Like it just looks like a bunch of club people trying to get a wicket to work, right? And when it comes down to it, there's probably been too much rain I mean, the sad thing was, it wasn't like it was raining during the play, right?
It
It was,
wasn't. So
yeah,
first 2 days that got abandoned, it didn't rain at all. Day 3 and day 4, there was rain initially, so they just called the day off like right at the start, which is
yeah.
even, more tragic. And there are a few things that you mentioned over here. Of course, the ACB chose Greater Noida, right? We'll get into the specifics of that as well, but just to tell people that it's not like this has been a forever home base for Afghanistan, but they have played 5 T20Is and 6 ODIs here versus Ireland in 2017 and 2020. So them playing here before was a reason, and also, as Jared mentioned, close proximity to Kabul is another. I'm guessing there might be a direct flight between Delhi and Kabul, and then Noida is not too far away from Delhi. So all of those things were taken into consideration by the ACB when they made the decision. But to the earlier point that you made, right? Greater Noida not only was a ground that BCCI was not conducting any games on, it was also blacklisted by the BCCI in September 2017. It's been a while because this ground apparently had been leased for staging a private league, which was under suspicion from the board's anti-corruption code. So a lot was going on over there, and subsequently it was stripped off of its status to host BCCI conducted matches. But there was a clause, Jared, specifying that this venue can be used by other boards. Now I wonder if that was, put there in specifically so that Afghanistan could be accommodated. My question is, why even offer a ground, which isn't fit for international cricket?
Yeah, I would assume that that clause was put in there because Afghanistan were already using the ground, and they said we're going to continue to use it. We like it. Obviously not, not a great idea, and it hasn't worked out perfectly for them. But yeah, I think when the home board says we're not going to be involved with this ground anymore, I think that's the time for Afghanistan to move on. It's really interesting to see what the future of Afghanistan is because they've been pushing India quite hard for that. Would have made more sense, you would have thought, to have a relationship with the ICC where you do have professional ability in the UAE. The problem with UAE has other issues, don't get me wrong, and part of which is it's more expensive to host games there because the hotels are more expensive, and there's a lot of different things that go in. The Afghanistan Cricket Board doesn't have a lot of money. I think someone from the Taliban yesterday came out and said they were thinking of banning cricket again.
Wow.
Like there's a lot of things going, not to mention all the stuff with the women's team that doesn't exist. So there's a lot of different elements of women's of Afghanistan cricket that are quite complex at the moment. But this was a big deal. This is their biggest test outside of the Sri Lanka one.
Because they don't really get to play opposition like New Zealand, right? They're always playing Ireland or Zimbabwe or Bangladesh or, at best Sri Lanka.
Yeah. So the Sri Lanka and the New Zealand ones are a step up for them, right? And that's not slagging off the other teams, but just from a coverage point of view and from from a former playing a team that was formerly world number 1, right? Like all these sorts of things. It's quite a big deal to play this, and it's gone to hell. And look, I don't have a great amount to do with Afghanistan administration, but I followed them in 2019, and it was quite clear to me that this was not anywhere near a professionally structured cricket organization. And there are some bad boards around the world, but there was just some basic things that they weren't doing and weren't available to them. So there's no doubt that there was some real issues, I think, when it came to that. And it looks like their decision making is still a little bit sporadic. And look, they'll probably say we played there a bunch of times before and never had any issues, right? But there was some red flags.
I mean, Rahul has mentioned in the comments actually that they did play India once. That is correct. So that would be their most high-profile game.
Oh yeah, sorry, I did forget about that one. Yeah, but that was early though, wasn't it? When did they play India? It was that 2018?
Very early in the piece.
Yeah,
that might have been their second test or something.
Yeah, so it's been a long time. Considering to have another, they had Sri Lanka and now New Zealand. Like this is kind of their biggest little run over a period of time. So yeah, it's not ideal.
Yeah, it's so tragic that this should have been an overthrows episode of us talking about this test.
Yes.
And it's become an uncovered, right? Because there has been no cricket. And just to add a bit more to this, Greater Noida did not come under the control of the BCCI or the Uttar Pradesh Cricket Association, the UPCA, it was under local administration, and those were signs of not to, like, put all of your eggs in the Noida basket. But apparently, according to some spokesperson from within the Afghan contingent, they said that both Afghanistan and New Zealand were satisfied with the ground prior to the game. And then there is some drama. Now, brace yourself for this one, Jarrod. I'm not sure if you have read this story to the lengths that I have, but ESPN Cricinfo reported that Afghanistan's team official, or one of their team officials, said that the players were unhappy with the facilities in Greater Noida and that Afghanistan had wanted to play in Kanpur, Lucknow, or Dehradun. Now, Kanpur is being readied for a test match between Bangladesh and India, right? Lucknow and Dehradun are hosting T20 leagues as is. And then there is a conflicting report that the ACB were offered Greater Noida, Bengaluru, and Kanpur. So there are two sides to the story. One is that it was the ACB's choice to come to Greater Noida, right? That was their call for the logistical reasons and the fact that they had played there before, right? And then the other side of this is that why was Greater Noida even offered? So there is far more to the story than meets the eye. And I mean, even Afghanistan's social media has been all over the place. Dehradun, Lucknow, and Greater Noida were reported to be the offered venues on their Instagram. Bengaluru, Kanpur, and Greater Noida were reported to be Afghanistan's, the venues that were offered to them on their Facebook account. So even they don't know what's going on. It's all so murky, and it's just a constant blame game between the BCCI and the ACB, and it's gotten really ugly.
Yeah, it's a weird fight to pick here because everything I understand is that there are a lot of people in Afghanistan cricket who did want them to play in Greater Noida, who have business interests in those areas now because they've been going back a few times. Who, as I said before, the hotels are cheaper in some places. Do you know what, like, they know what they're doing there? I find it hard to believe that they were going to play in Bengaluru. Like, I just find it hard to believe that was an option that was really a realistic one and that was being floated to them. Although, who knows?
There was a catch over there, by the way. The Chinnaswamy just hosted a Duleep Trophy game, so it's not like... So there's no confirmation on this, by the way. The article that I read, which is by Wisden and has no author, it mentioned that, apparently Chinnaswamy was not part of the deal, and instead it was the KSCA Stadium in Alur, which is on the outskirts of Bengaluru. But I've been told by my followers from India that even that ground has fantastic drainage like the Chinnaswamy. So it is monsoon season in this part of the world, Jarrod. Yeah. So they've got to think about that as well.
I think I think they like Greater Noida and they wanted to go back to Greater Noida, and they were probably given other options. But I also don't think those other options were ideal, right? Yeah. I don't think they were perfect, and they went with this one. They'd been there before, and now it's gone to part, and everyone's making fun of them on social media. And so because of that, there is, but we wanted all these other grounds. I just find that a little bit harder to believe. I'm sure someone from Afghanistan cricket will reach out and try and correct me on this, but I just find that a little bit harder to believe. Regardless of that, they don't have to play these games in India, right? Yeah. If there wasn't an ideal situation in India, there are plenty of other places in world cricket that they could have struck deals with. That they could have moved on. It doesn't have to be in India. And I suppose the interesting thing at the moment is as I said before, what is the future, right? Are they going to stick in India? Are they going to go somewhere else? We have to work out what the best system is for Afghanistan cricket, and at the moment we're too busy looking at a man carrying an electric fan out on a field. So
yeah,
the playing game isn't going to help anyone. Yeah,
massive patches of the ground cut out like it's cake or something, right?
Yeah,
it could be a part of that TV show. Is it cake or is it the wet patches of Greater Noida? That's where we're at right now.
I would definitely have that on Netflix.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, we have to look at both parties over there because the finger pointing isn't stopping and it doesn't help anyone. But, at the end of the day, ACB chose Greater Noida. You can question the BCCI of whether they or why they offered Greater Noida in the first place, but Afghanistan had already played there. There were benefits, the close proximity to Kabul, and it's their choice. So ultimately, you can't pin this entirely on the BCCI. And
I mean, I find it hard to blame the BCCI for this.
Yeah, same.
In this case, this is a ground that is not even a ground that they use. Like, it
Exactly.
would be different if this was in Kanpur and this happened. I think it'd be fair to say you decided to host this. You're in charge of this ground, and it's not up to international standard. Don't rent
Hmm.
your ground out if that's the case. That isn't what has happened here, right?
Nope.
They had already decided that they didn't like this ground. Forget the fixing element and everything else. They were already pretty out on this ground, and they had
Yeah.
moved on a little bit from it.
Hmm.
You know, I'm not saying there aren't. I'm sure there are issues here with the ACB and
Hmm.
BCCI, as in I'm sure everyone played a part in this being the debacle that it is. Right? It's never
Yeah.
like just one person or just one organization. But when it
Hmm.
comes down to it, like uh, Afghanistan wanted this ground.
Yep.
Maybe they would have wanted a more perfect one, but you've got to
Hmm.
fit into what the other country has available to you, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe they were going to play in Bengaluru on that outer ground, but they would just played a second 11 game there or something, and the conditions may not have still been of the quality that you needed. Maybe those other grounds weren't international enough, if you know what I mean, from a
Yeah.
camera's perspective and all these sorts of things that you need to think about when you're hosting these games. The facilities for all the professionals who are working in that, all those sort of things. So look, it's a shit show, obviously,
Yeah.
and it's embarrassing for the ACB, but
Hmm.
it's not. If you go through the history of cricket, I think you'll find lots of cases where we played test matches in places we probably shouldn't have before.
Yeah, I mean, from a viewer's perspective, and even from the player's perspective, it's just extremely sad considering Afghanistan don't really get to play many tests
Hmm.
as is, and then especially against opposition like New Zealand. So if you take all of those things into consideration, then this is a massive loss because it's not like they've got other test matches scheduled. And even this one, to get this kind of penciled in took a lot of effort. And for it to kind of blow up on their faces like this, it is like there is an element of tragedy over there. But like, what I want to ask you is, and one of my followers DM'd me when I tweeted because I was getting really annoyed at a lot of Pakistan accounts throwing shade at the BCCI because from my lens this was more on the ACB, right? They were the ones who had fucked up over here. So some of the people who, and they're from India and they follow Afghanistan cricket, like Karthik Raj and Kshitij are two. They mentioned that, the ACB pays a sum of money to the BCCI for hosting these games of cricket in India. So it is also the BCCI's responsibility to not even make Greater Noida available as an option. What do you have to say about that?
The BCCI aren't making Greater Noida available as an option, as far
They're
as
just
I'm
asking
aware.
for it. You're saying
I
that they're
think,
just directly asking for it.
from what I understand, having talked,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to pretend to have done tons of it, but I sent some messages out, to try and work out what the hell was happening.
Hmm.
It was my understanding that Afghanistan put it on the list because they like it. Right
Hmm.
now, maybe you could say that the BCCI should have just said no.
Hmm.
We're not doing that anymore. Here's why. We've got some issues with the ground in general, and now we have some issues directly relating to this league that they ran. We're not in charge of this ground because that's
Hmm.
the big thing, right? The BCCI isn't actually in charge of this ground. Like it's
Yeah.
it's
They
not
have
a normal BCCI affiliated stadium.
no control over the stadium. Not even the
So
UPCA, as I said earlier.
yeah, right. So I mean, there is an element. Maybe that's what the BCCI should have said is
Hmm.
it's not our ground. We have nothing to do with it. Here are the grounds we're offering you. If you want to go and make a deal with this other organization, in Greater Noida directly, you're allowed to do that. And that's what I was saying before. Probably that's what the BCCI should have done. Right? It's just been really honest and go, no, we're not allowing this. We're not going to be involved in a game at this ground anymore. So if you want to pick that, you're on your own. And if not, and if you want to pick one of our other grounds, then obviously we can try and do a deal for you. So maybe
Okay.
I think that's a fair criticism of the BCCI, just to say that they could have done something along those lines.
Hmm.
But also, that's kind of not how those things work, right? Do you know what I mean? I don't think anyone knew that something like this was going to happen. The BCCI probably thought, okay, well, they want to play there. If that's their choice, that's their choice, and they're on
Hmm.
their own because we're not really involved in that ground all that much. No one
Yeah.
really thought it would end in this sort of situation. And if you
Hmm.
knew it was going to end in this, in a possibility of something like this, I'm sure the BCCI would have done what I just said. Right?
Yeah.
That's what they'll do next time, right? They'll say that is a private ground. We allow you to play a test match in our country on that ground, but we have absolutely nothing to do with it. So you need to make sure that it is up to international quality. And if it's not,
Hmm.
that is on you. And
Yeah.
maybe that's where these things go into the future. But it'd be very different if they were playing at Kanpur or one of the other grounds that you mentioned before.
I mean, the alternate ground in Bengaluru, the one at Allur, that in hindsight looks like the best option because, both of those grounds I've heard, I mean, we know about the Chinnaswamy that it has fantastic drainage, but everyone who I've spoken to has told me that the other ground is no different. And maybe in Karnataka, that's something they even look at more closely as opposed to Noida. There's some interesting
Yeah,
comments coming here.
but the drainage is a red herring here, right?
Hmm.
Can that ground have a professional TV setup? Can that
True.
ground have access to all the different match officials that need to be involved from the ICC and from ACB and from New Zealand cricket? Does that ground have professional training facilities where the nets are? It doesn't. I don't care about the drainage. Like that's a one little thing. To have an international ground, you need a lot of different things. This isn't like having a first class game somewhere, right? So
Yeah.
there's a ground around the corner from me in Beckenham, right? I am sure that they could host a test match the same as this ground could in Bangalore because the wicket is fine and everything else. But the amount of stuff that would have to be built around it, when Kent play a game there, they have to put a bunch of tents up. You can't have a bunch of tents up for TV, right? For TV, you need a lot more infrastructure, right? That Greater Noida has access to that because it has had proper international cricket being played there before. So there are facilities for that. So it's a lot more complicated than just drainage. Like there are lots of first-class cricket grounds in the world, in I don't know, somewhere like Whitgift where Surrey play and Scarborough and all these places that could host a test match on the field. But it's not just on the field, it's off the field. And I think that's a big issue. Sorry, you said there were some comments.
No. I think that's a fantastic point. Actually, I didn't think of that because I'm sure that the alternate ground in Bengaluru might not have those facilities, and that could be also a factor in their decision making. But Bijan Mandal in the comments is saying that Greater Noida is a area where a lot of Afghan people live, refugees and people who are there seeking political asylum. So free entry to Afghan fans and all of that stuff could also be a reason, just because they would want it to feel like a home game.
There's no doubt that there is, as I said, the ACB can talk about the BCCI's issues in this. I'm not even saying there aren't BCCI issues in it. As I said before, I doubt that they didn't play a role in this one way or another. But when it comes down to it, Afghanistan really like Greater Noida, right? And I know that because I've had chats with them, right? I've had chats with people from Afghanistan who are like, we want to make this our home area so that we can go and play there. They don't want to particularly go to the UAE, right? They don't want to have to do a deal with Sri Lanka where they're on their own. And those are the two other main options that I think have been floated to them, right? They really do want to play in Greater Noida, right? The problem is that Greater Noida isn't as great as it used to be.
Yeah, there was actually a tweet by one of my connections on Twitter, Omkar. He said that it's time to demote the name to Great Noida because it's clearly not greater anymore. But yeah, I mean, absolute shit show. Hopefully, this is a lesson for all parties involved, particularly the ACB, and it can be avoided in the future because Afghanistan need to be, or at least, the men's team. Unfortunately, the women can't play, and I saw a few Twitter accounts throwing shade, at the men's team as well. But yeah, they need to play test cricket in order to get better at it. And opportunities like this don't come frequently when you get to play New Zealand. So all in all, very, very sad.
Just from a New Zealand perspective, a bit of a pain in the ass, right? Because New Zealand would have thought to themselves, we've got this incredible Asian swing of matches. Let's start with Afghanistan. They would have considered themselves favorites for that one. I didn't look at the odds, but after the first day it was washed out, New Zealand were 4-1, I think. No, 3-1, and Afghanistan were about 20-1. So they were quite heavily favored with the bookies and the betting markets at that point. And also, it's a good way of starting your tour. Like it doesn't really happen as much these days. But I remember Ireland. Ireland's big plan was to be like New Zealand, right? Which was when a team would go and tour Australia, you would usually tour New Zealand at the same time in the old days. And that's what Ireland wanted to be. Come and play your warm-up games in test matches against Ireland. We still get the test matches. You get proper teams trying to beat you rather than, county teams just taking the piss a little bit. Afghanistan can be that again. They could start to tack themselves on to Indian tours and Sri Lankan tours and Bangladesh tours and Pakistan tours and say, you want to play an Asian team? Great. Come have some practice in Asia against another Asian team first. And, and we'll try and beat you. Again, it's not a practice game. You're going to have to be good here. So that side of it, when you think from an administration side and a planning side, is the next team going to be as comfortable to do that now with the thought that everything can go wrong and there may not be a game? So there's so many factors here at play with something like this. But it is worth saying that, cricket boards in their infancy, and especially one is like the ACB, who has so many other issues to deal with on a day-by-day basis, it is very, very hard for them to get everything right. And they're not in control of this, right? As in, even if everything went perfectly, they're not in control of it. People within India are in control of it. They don't have the same say when they go in. Like I've seen this with broadcasters. Like broadcasters will go into a foreign country and they'll talk to the people on the ground the same way they would at home. And like the people on the ground are like, I don't know what channel you work for. I didn't give a shit. I'm going to go take my lunch break, right? Whereas at home, everything has to be done. Oh, this is the home broadcaster, right? Like it's just different. The relationships are different. And if you don't have a home ground and you can't play at home, this is one of the issues. And, go back to Pakistan and, the UAE, there were lots of little issues that Pakistan had to deal with. And remember, Pakistan played home games in England. Did they play any home games in Sri Lanka? Was it just...
That was a while back, not in the recent exile or anything, but they have played home games in Sri Lanka back in the early 2000s.
Exactly. So, and there's a reason why you go to UAE. It's a little bit easier to control things. But as I said at the start, it ain't cheap. Right? Everything in the UAE is a lot more expensive on every single level than it is going to be in Greater Noida, right? And that's one of the reasons even going to Sri Lanka causes issues, because there aren't as many flights directly into Sri Lanka from... Do you know what I mean? Like every level that you add to this, it becomes more complicated and everything else. And that's the one thing I would say of, we give a lot of shit to the ICC when they get things wrong. The ICC is an events company. Right. And yes, occasionally things go wrong with weird hotels and all sorts of things. But generally, that's what the ICC excel at. The cricket boards themselves don't. It's not the same. They're not at that level. And in this case, we have seen it spectacularly go wrong.
Yeah. Not just have we lost pretty much the entire test match. I doubt there'll be any play tomorrow either. But Ibrahim Zadran, one of Afghanistan's crucial players, is also injured, right? So that would also hurt them. And I think moving forward, they just have to kind of weigh out all the options and maybe even try to broker a deal with India that, hey, give us some of those major test centers. Why not let us have the Kotla, right? Or the Arun Jaitley Stadium, or whatever it's called.
It'd be really interesting to talk to BCCI and the ACB. You can't talk to them now, of course. I don't think they need a major test venue. Right, I think what they need is a place who's desperate to host them with an international setup around them. And Greater Noida were desperate to host them, right? But they maybe no longer have that international setup around because they're not getting... This is my guess. Greater Noida would have made most of its money from hosting Indian games, right? And they're no longer hosting Indian games. They won't have the sort of finances that they once had. So you want it to be in a place that still has enough money or is funded one way or another, maybe by the local league or the local government or whatever that may be, but also has international. Like that it's really hard. Have a look at what happened with the Bangladesh Women's World Cup, right? I chatted to a couple of people about that, and they were like, there just aren't many options, Jarrod. Like it's not as easy as you think to just go into a country and host something. You've got to think about hotels and transport. As we were saying before, all the professional things around the ground and everything like that. Weather at that time of year. Is there a local election at that time of year? Is there a festival at that time of year? And that's what I mean. The ICC, that is what they do. They spend all their time with that because they don't host anything at home, right? So they are experts in going into another country, whether it be USA with no cricket culture or the West Indies with lots of cricket culture, going in and going, okay, these are the things we need. Bang, 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 bang. And I remember when the global T20 was started, and it had the players were all moaning and it wasn't professionally set up. And I was asked if I wanted to be the general manager of that league. And I was like, well, I've never really done anything like that. And they were like, no, it's pretty simple. Just come up with a checklist of things that professionals need and make sure everyone has them. And Joy Bhattacharya ended up I don't think he got it straight away, but he's now, majorly involved in that league. And it's like, it's still a fly by night league, as we, you can tell from the recent game that was played there, where they had all their issues, and we've done a video over on the main channel on. But the point being is, it's a lot more, the players don't complain as much anymore. It's a lot more professional. You need to know what you are doing, right? And the ACB is still not probably that kind of an organization right at the moment.
So they need to go back to the drawing board and sort this shit out, because it is untenable going towards the future. Right. Okay. That wraps up all the talking points. Let's do our super chats quickly. There are 3 of them. Yeah. Aditya Mani Jha with the first one says, Head and Marsh hit the last 14 balls of the power play for boundaries against Scotland in the second T20I. Surely this is some sort of record. How do white ball bowlers plan against Head in this kind of form? Wasn't it just Head who hit 14 consecutive deliveries for boundaries?
Can't be, because it was 14 consecutive deliveries. I think it was both of them.
Fair enough. Yeah. Head and Marsh then.
Yeah, I think it was both of them. No, it was a record. It was the most boundaries in a row. I don't know what the previous record was, though. To be fair, I didn't go back and have a look at it from that point of view. Head's an interesting one because he wants to hit you on the offside naturally, right? And so he gives himself room to carve the ball away, but he's so strong at picking the ball up on the leg side that he's kind of already hit that peak David Miller zone, if you know what I mean. And he's probably a better offside player than David Miller, and maybe not quite as good a leg side player as David Miller, but it's the same sort of thing of you can't bowl wide to him. So against someone like Mitchell Marsh, you're probably going to try and bowl wide Yorkers, right? And that's a fairly standard thing against, Chris Gale or Andre Russell and all those guys who set up to hit to the leg side. You can bowl really, really wide outside off to them. Right, they're still going to get some away, and obviously it doesn't work over a long period of time, but you can do it. But Travis Head wants to hit you through the offside, so if you bowl those wide Yorkers, he's probably going to hit you to backward point, to cover point, all the way through to maybe even up to long off, and so you can't set a field in the power play to that. And then separately, if you bowl straight, he can pick you up. I think bowling straight is still the best option. I think you keep the stumps in play with him, and I do think he gets bowled a lot. I don't know what the stats are compared to other top T20 openers, but my guess is he'd be well above that. So I'd be more in line to think he's going to back away and give himself room and try and hit to the offside, or he's going to slog across to the leg side and keep the stumps in play. The problem with that is that doesn't actually stop him scoring. But I think if I was coming up with a plan to him right at the moment, I would just say to the bowlers, for the first 15 balls, every ball needs to hit the stumps. Right.
I mean, we saw how Mitchell Starc got the better of him, right? So left-handed or left-arm seamer who has a bit of clicks on him, and then they angle the ball away from Travis Head at a good length. That might work. That sounds like
I mean, that is we've seen him struggle sometimes with sort of higher end pace a little bit early on in his innings, not later on, but early on in his innings. But I think you have to keep the stumps in play, because if you don't keep the stumps in play, even if he slashes away, chances are he's going to go past the slips. So you can get some caught behinds with him and everything as well. But I just think early on, I would bowl those first 15 balls at the stumps at high pace around the wicket or left arm over the wicket at him. The problem is once he gets going, I'm not sure there's a great plan for Travis Head at the moment. I'm a bit surprised that people haven't bowled an over of bounces at him more often. Like if he's going to hit 30 runs off you anyway, fuck it. He can hit the 30 runs off 6 bounces. Right?
I mean, we've seen how short balls have troubled him in Test cricket, right?
Exactly.
World Test Championship final comes into mind. India tried the short ball plan too late, in my opinion, in that game. And when they did, they kind of did eventually get him out. So maybe that's one of the ways that you could target him early on in a T20 innings. But there is no denying that he is probably one of the most, or arguably the most destructive batters going around in T20 cricket right now. Limited overs cricket in general, right? He is someone who has evolved. Yeah. I mean, it's such a shame that he got good right after we shot the episode of Best Active All Format Cricketers, because he didn't make the list and he hadn't shown us this level of evolution then. But he would be right up there currently, and he's an absolute menace to deal with. There's no denying that. All right, Abe Sahota with the next super chat. Asks, big BGT for Gill, considering his stats in Australia. Didn't he score like 91 in that famous Gabba test win?
Yeah, I wonder if that's what they're saying. Like, this is when he has to come good. I mean, I'm not 100% sure what that is.
What are his numbers? Let's look at them.
But I also think that, like, at a certain point, it doesn't like. th- is there anyone in India that this isn't a big series for?
Yeah, true.
Do you know
Plus,
what I
like
mean? Like, it's not
he's
the same.
someone who just cracked the first drop position. Like he scored runs in that position versus England, and everyone was on his case. They wanted him out of the team. So I feel like if there's any one person who is not in as much pressure for this series, it might be Gill, because he's kind of proven his worth in his role, and he scored runs in Australia, crucial runs in Australia prior. So that puts him in better stead in my
Yeah.
or from
So
my point of view.
I'm not exactly sure what this question means, but so Gill's played 4 matches. He played an ODI, made 33, and then he played 3 test matches. So he averages 48 in Australia overall.
Yeah.
And I would say his game is more or less set up to be fine in Australia. Like, I'm interested to see how he goes, but I just can't imagine there's any player of which the BGT is not a big deal. Like, it just is, right?
Tell you what, Abhay Sahota, bigger BGT for Yashasvi Jaiswal. Everyone is really keen on seeing how he fares on Australian soil. All right, last super chat of the day. Path right winger, of course, as always, has a contribution. He asks, long time KL Rahul apologist here. Always seems like a nice guy that doesn't get any recognition. I'm assuming that's the word that you missed over here. What can he do to make a Root-esque comeback? Okay, so first things first. Root-esque is a strong word over there. Like, you're expecting too much from KL Rahul. At best, he makes a Mitch Marsh-esque comeback, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a weird one. Also, I'm not sure Root actually needed to make a comeback. He was even when he was struggling, he was an above average batter. Do you know what I mean? Whereas that's not been the case for KL Rahul. Look, I think I don't think I've ever met him or ever chatted to KL Rahul at all. For me, technically, there isn't a lot of issues. We did a podcast on him the other day on Red Inca. A lot of the problem is that he's the sort of player that is always in your squad because of the utility that he brings. And those sort of players usually aren't elite talent. But KL was thought at one stage he was going to be an elite talent. So he hasn't lived up to the hype. That's not his fault. That's just, that means the hype was wrong, right? Like, no one can really project how talented a player is going to be. But we do know that he's obviously a well above average level talent, and who probably, especially in Test cricket, hasn't made that. The best thing that would happen to him is there's just a spot in the side that he needs to fill for the next 2 or 3 years. He plays in the same position over and over again, and gets backed by the management to be that player. I can't imagine that's going to happen, though, because I think at home he'll probably get dropped for Sarfaraz, because they'll want the better player of spin. Rishabh Pant will obviously be the wicket keeper once he's fully fit and firing and everything else. So there's 2 positions where he's already battling with other people. So his career is probably going to go in a similar way. The only thing I would say is, I'm just trying to remember how old he is at the moment. Just
probably 32.
I would have thought so. Yeah. So he's 32 and a half, right?
Yeah.
He might have already like, if you look at his IPL numbers and maybe his ODI numbers, we might be on the back end of his peak anyway, right? Some players still peak in their mid-30s and can go on and everything else, and he certainly has the talent to be able to do that. But in general, I would expect over the next 2 years might be the end of peak role anyway. And if he hasn't made a success of Test cricket consistently by now, I would find it hard to believe that is the case. Having said all that, I'm not sure that they are fully backing Shreyas Iyer or Sarfaraz at the moment as overseas players. So again, he's probably going to get thrown in for tours when they go away, and you would expect there to be a lower average for those. He might play as the scapegoat on away tours and average 35, 38, and not be all that. You play a couple of very good hundreds, but not be that consistent a player.
I mean, he was mad impressive in South Africa recently, right? It's really
I can't remember his numbers in South Africa.
I think he scored a ton or something close to it. Yeah, like when India played on that minefield of a surface in the first test and then won the second test. They drew
Yeah,
that
and then
series
was he
1-1.
out of I can't remember if he was injured or out of the side again when they next played. I really do think that's how they're going to use him, as someone who,
Yeah.
who probably plays more away. And he doesn't have a fantastic away record, but he doesn't have a fantastic home record either. But I think they would say that he can handle fast bowling and overseas conditions in a way that a lot of the other younger players. It's not that they can't. It's just that they haven't been, like, even Jaiswal hasn't been tested enough, right, in those sorts of conditions at the moment. So, there's just an element of they need to do that. So KL is going to stick around. If he sticks around, that gives him another chance to get it all right. Like, it's all format players like him. I think it's so hard to be consistently good right on. In fact, I want to look something up right as we do this. So, Josh Hazlewood has been a very, very consistent test bowler for a very long period of time. And when he 2019, 2020, 2021, he was averaging about 20 with the ball, right? Over whatever it was, 15 or so test matches. And for a little period afterwards, his average went up I don't know what it is, but I think it's high 20s or something. It's not massive. It's not like a massive difference, but there's a difference. That's the period at which he really starts to get good at white ball cricket, right? He doesn't spend as much time thinking about what he's doing in red ball cricket. And for a long period of time, Hazlewood didn't think about white ball cricket at all.
Yeah.
And so there's a noticeable difference when you do that. You change your priorities. You change what you're thinking about. And I don't know if you saw the game last night. Josh Hazlewood came in at one stage and he cocked his wrist like he was going to bowl a cutter to Liam Livingstone. And then when he delivered it, it was seam up and at pace. And he went straight through Livingstone and bowled him.
Wow.
He wasn't thinking about that stuff 4 years ago. 5 years ago, certainly. Didn't even enter his mind. 5 years ago, he was, I'm going to bowl the wobble ball or back of a length. I'm going to hit the pitch and try and edge off. Now he's thinking about T20 tricks and all these different things that he can do. There's only so much room in the brain, right? If KL wants to really become a test player and he starts practicing all of his time on it, I think he could be a better player than he has been, because he's made so many good hundreds in so many locations. We know he's a talent, even if his overall average is disappointing.
Yep.
But does he have the time? Right? We were talking about this with Sam Curran, John Norman, and Deep Dasgupta yesterday. We did a little thing on Sam Curran. It's like, none of us really doubt that Sam Curran could play Test cricket, right? Because his overall skills suggest he could. But he's going to have to make himself a much more useful bowler on flat pitches in Test cricket. He's going to have to come up with ways to be effective, and he's going to have to improve his batting to, at the very least, to be a very good number 7. And if he really wants to be a Test cricketer, he should be trying to bat at number 6, right? And then he's a gun player for England. Does he have time to do that? Is that what his main thought process is? And this is the big thing. We all sit there and we fixate on this stuff as fans and as media and everything else. But for the players, right? They've got millions of different things going through their head at any one time.
It's interesting how Sam Curran rose to the scene in that Test series versus India. When Virat Kohli was all praise and he was like, England have unearthed a future superstar, and now he's a strictly white ball player. So arcs change very quickly in the sport now, and KL Rahul also must have his hands full, right? Because he's going to be playing the IPL still. He's going to be an option for India in limited overs cricket. And in ODIs particularly, they might be tempted to play him in the middle order. Might not, who's to say? But hasn't
he
success.
Been incredible? I think he's been incredible in ODI cricket over, was it the last couple of years? I can't remember, whenever it was.
Take the World Cup final out of the equation, because that's an innings he catches or is scrutinized for a lot. If you take that out, he's been pretty damn good in ODI cricket, and even in Test cricket, the away record holds up. Right now, he scored a ton in South Africa. I remember that 100 he scored in England as an opener. And Rahul has also confirmed in the comments that he was injured during the England series, right? So he will remain an option for India. Might not get every single game, but they'll keep him around. And he's just going to earn as much money as possible on the side playing the IPL as well, which is going to be a big deal for him, because it is, his biggest payday of the year probably at this point.
There is one thing I want to say. This is right across all sports, but we don't talk about it much in cricket, which is fans generally want the next young player to come in, because that next young player might be the next Virat Kohli. right? KL Rahul right now is not going to be the next Virat Kohli, right?
Yep.
What's the best case scenario for him is like a Faf du Plessis late career peak where he suddenly starts to make a lot of runs, right? In some ways, he's very similar to Faf du Plessis in that he has all the skills, but it took Faf forever to really become a top-level international player, right? People forget that. Like, you know, when he first got I think when he first started playing for Lancashire, it was partly because he was bowling leg spin, right? He was a utility player who was a great fielder, Faf du Plessis. So everyone wants that next big star. Everyone wants the next AB de Villiers. They don't want the next Faf du Plessis when you're looking at your team and everything else. Yeah. And so we push for that. That's not what teams want. What teams want is they don't want someone like Sarfaraz to come in that they have to actually spend lots of time grooming and changing and explaining international cricket to and everything else, right? No older teams, right, want a bunch of rookies that they have to babysit. I can promise you this. Every time I've ever worked for a cricket team, this has been an issue. Every single time, right? They want old professionals who know what they're doing and add to the situation. KL Rahul is a captain. He's a wicketkeeper. He can bat in multiple positions. Something goes wrong, they can throw him at a bunch of different things, right? He really fits the way that selectors, that coaches, that senior players like to think of cricket. So someone like him is going to be kept around in the way that Ajinkya Rahane was kept around longer, right?
But he's even more useful because KL Rahul, considering how he's so, you know, versatile in terms of where he can bat and what he can do, he is the ultimate firefighting tool. Exactly.
And so those sorts of senior players stick around longer because of what they do. But we don't look at we don't look as fans at players in the same way. Yeah. Right? We have a very different way of thinking about these things. And we think, you know, and I'm as guilty as this as anyone. Can I tell you a story about Ezekiel the other day? We were watching the Australia-Scotland game and the openers came out to bat for Australia. And I was like, you've got to watch this Fraser McGurk. This is the most exciting player in the world. You got to watch Fraser McGurk. You got to watch, and Fraser McGurk couldn't hit the ball off the square, hit one straight up in the air and was out, right? And I left the room. Right? Because I was like, oh, that's done. Completely forgetting that Travis Head and Mitch Marsh were at the crease. It was at the Grange. And, so I came back in, I think, at the start of the 14 balls, right? But I had forgotten how excited the other two guys could be, right? Like, because that's not how that is not how our brain as fans is set up, right? And, you watch this in you see it in football, you see it in basketball, you see it in all these different sports. It's the same thing. If everyone wants the rookie or the player the player from your academy, that's who you want to come. Why is he not playing? And it's like, the reason he's not playing is he probably has skills that give him a really high ceiling, but he's not a professional in all the other things, or he can't even do the other things because he's still developing as a talent.
Yeah,
that's not KL Rahul, right? They know, India know exactly who KL Rahul is. Right. And he's dependable and he's reliable and they can fit him into multiple positions. And we just have to remember that when we're talking about the way that teams are put together, because the people who put the teams together are very different than the people who are yelling on Twitter. Right. And they come from completely different worlds. It is not a selector's job to make you happy as a fan. It is a selector's job to put together the team that they think is best likely to win the next game or, to build towards the future. That is their job. Their job is not to help, long name, bunch of numbers on Twitter, get more clout.
Yeah, I think that's a good time or good, cue to end this podcast. Of course, thank you to everyone who made it to the live session and commented in the comment section, sent your super chats and all of that stuff. We are grateful. And just a quick reminder to all of you that you can go to goodareas.co and bookmark that webpage. It can prove to be your one-stop shop for all the work that we do as part of this team, whether it be written content, videos, or podcasts. We'll be back with some more live shows soon enough. I know Estelle and I have to preview a bunch of test series, so you can keep an eye out for that. Also, we're recording tons of crick picks and footmarks and red inkers and all of that stuff. So you guys will have a lot of content on your screens. And have a good day and enjoy your weekend. That's going to be it from myself and Jarrod. See you guys soon enough. Goodbye.
Thanks to NV Play's data insights for helping me with this video. They can help any cricket team improve their skills using their advanced technology. If you love cricket on a deep spiritual level and want to be involved when no matches are being played, we have the game for you. Hit Wicket is so good that Harsha Bogle and me have backed it. And that's a lot of nerd energy behind one game. This is a strategic game of cricket, and it's not just about whacking your screen really, really hard with your finger. This isn't a game where you swipe all around to try and hit the ball. You work out what works best based on real-life cricket situations. For instance, dot balls bring pressure, ones and twos lead to fours. There is no way you can just hit a six every ball or take wickets all the time. This is proper cricket, yet it still has some special gaming powers in there as well. And so this game is about playing, but also building and managing your team. You are the batter, bowler, owner, coach, captain. It's your dream, right? And there are no ads. It's just cricket. Download Hit Wicket now and bring out the cricket legend in you, because Hit